Welcome to another episode of The People of Private Capital. Today, I sit down with Alan Merriman, the CEO and co founder of Elkstone Partners. Elkstone is a multi-family office investing across a range of asset classes, complementing its wealth focus. And today, Alan and I talk about his path from partner at PwC in his early 30s through his experiences working for a major mutual in the Irish market in the mid 2000s to the formation of Elkstone in 2011. We follow him through the multidisciplinary success that it's become today. We cover real estate, venture capital, and the alternative strategies that Elkstone brings to market. And we also take a look at what success looks like for Elkstone in the coming years. So take a listen to Alan Merriman here on The People of Private Capital. Okay, well, Alan, first of all, thanks very much for taking time out to join us here on The People of Private Capital. Delighted to be able to spend some time with a fellow Irishman. In fact, the first Irishman, apart from myself, that we've had on the podcast here, some 16, 17 episodes in. So, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Well, look, delighted to be here, and now that I understand I'm only the second Irishman after yourself, that's a real privilege. So, hopefully, I won't let you down.
No, not at all, not at all. Well, Alan, as is tradition on the opening of each episode, we like to understand a little bit more about the guest. So, would you just for people who don't know Elkstone or don't know yourself, could you just provide a quick introduction to yourself and then perhaps position Elkstone in terms of your area of focus?
Okay, well, look, just in terms of myself, I kind of described my journey as a number of chapters. So I had a very traditional Irish background in terms of went to University College Dublin, did a Bachelor of Commerce Business Studies there. And the one thing I didn't want to do was accounting. I ended up doing accounting. My dad had been an accountant, so for whatever reason, it was in my head to do something different. But I ended up doing accounting. Joined PW, became PwC, did very well there, really enjoyed my time at PwC, was there for 17 years, and made it way to partner, ran the financial services practice, had very significant clients like Bank of Ireland, for the Irish firm and so forth. And then ultimately left. Wasn't quite, I was happy there, but I got headhunted, kept saying no, but eventually said yes. Dublin, Ireland is a small place, got a really nice opportunity. Went to EBS, the Building Society, so into banking, and then got to try my hand in what I call the real world. Wanted to see if I'd be any good at that. Had a really interesting 3.5 years there. Timing was poor in terms of the global financial crisis, and ultimately moved on. And then ended up in kind of private equity in terms of helping establish a business headquartered out of Ireland that was linking together S&P 500 and sovereign wealth funds, and did lots of interesting things there. And then ultimately ended up setting up Elkstone, which has evolved over the course of time. It started with one single client, helping them with their wealth management, but today has evolved into being Ireland's leading specialist in private markets. And we deal with the wealth channel, and we have our own product in terms of real estate and venture. And we're at what I think is the very, very early innings of access to private markets for the Irish investor base. And when we think of the Irish investor base, we think of both the geography of Ireland and we think of the Irish diaspora. So we're on an exciting journey, be it that we're at the very early start of it.
Yeah, yeah. And so your background at PwC was kind of more audit focused, and then you moved into, I guess, the mutual environment in EBS, and that move to that, I guess, high net worth individual focus initially at Elkstone. What precipitated that? Like, that's quite a, on the face of it at least, a reasonably risky move for, you may partner in your 30s, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, early
and
30s.
and then moving to EBS, director of finance at EBS, and then into, what on the face of it is a pretty challenging business. What precipitated that move? What
Well,
was your
look,
thinking?
I think, going back to PwC, I was very lucky in PwC. I actually, while I was an audit partner at that time, I straddled both audit and consulting, and I did lots of different things within the consulting arena.
Hmm.
Um, and that gave me a flavor for, I suppose, more of a multidisciplinary approach, and I enjoyed variety and so forth. And look, I was probably considered to be a bit of a superstar in PwC at such a young age and leading the financial services business, but I just felt myself that it wasn't the real world, and I kind of fancied myself in terms of, how would I cut it in
Right.
industry? Would I cut it in the real world? But I wanted to stay in Ireland, and that was a challenge because, the opportunities, I was clearly earning very well as a young partner in PwC, and, as you say, it was, certainly the least risky path was to stay and just serve out my time and continue to do well there. But I had this, desire to make a difference or try and make a difference and see if I could, make it in the real world. Now, EBS, in an Irish context was maybe a hybrid. It wasn't, a cutthroat commercial environment.
Yeah.
It was a mutual building society, but, it had a very interesting business model where they had commercial businesses and they were run very much for profit with the view that they would cross subsidize and support the members of the society in terms of, lending and deposits and so forth. And
Hmm.
and it gave me a wonderful opportunity to try my hand across a whole array of different disciplines. So that was very fortunate. And then ultimately, in terms of, the move to Elkstone, that kind of happened by accident. The EBS was caught up in the global financial crisis. I left along with the chairman in terms of accountability and giving the opportunity for EBS to move on. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, and through just serendipity, I ended up meeting a guy called Roger Jenkins, who'd been one of the most significant players within Barclays Group,
Hmm.
and Roger and myself hadn't known each other, met, clicked, got on well. He was setting up a business here in Ireland, and enticed me over to join him, and I spent a couple of years with Roger in that mode. I was his COO, helping him build that business. It did very well, and he ultimately, though, left to join BTG Pactual and become managing director there prior to their IPO. He wanted me to go with him. I was less
Right.
keen. I still had a young family. I still wanted very much to build my, career in Ireland. And he came up with the idea of, look, Alan, why don't you look after me, look after my wealth,
Hmm.
and help me behind the scenes in BTG Pactual, and that will mean you can stay in Ireland and do what you want, have the best of all worlds. So I agreed to do it for a year and did it for a year. Got lucky in the sense that I delivered very strong performance for Roger. He was very happy with what I was doing. At the end of the year, he was keen I would make it my career. I
Hmm.
was less keen and came up with the idea of, look, okay, if I'm going to do it, let me build out a multifamily office. So you'd be one client. I didn't think Roger would agree, but he did. And he
Right.
was very good to me in that context. And that allowed my business, Elkstone, get up and running. And we literally just built it client by client. It took us 4 or 5 years to get, a still small number and 10 plus clients, all international, where we were looking after all their needs, and the business just evolved opportunistically from that point forward.
Mm. So you started as I guess, a single family office, expanded into multifamily. Where was the focus? Let's say the geographic focus for that. Was it Ireland? Was it international?
It
Let's
was
say.
it was it was contradictory in the sense that the team and I were in Ireland, and
Mm.
I built the team in Ireland, very
Yeah.
conscious I wanted to have an Irish team, and it was great because I was providing an opportunity for talent here that just wasn't available in the Irish market.
Hmm.
Um, but the clients were all found through word of mouth. So one client led to the next client, which was, brilliant from my perspective. And,
Best kind.
you
Yeah.
know, they did it because there were synergies in terms of, sharing costs, and there was clearly synergies in terms of deal flow and opportunity. And it also, gave everybody peace of mind because the more we grew and solidified, the more it was very clear we were going to be around for quite some time. And that was a win-win. Ultimately, though, and this is a challenge of, family office and multifamily office, my own time, I became both the asset and the liability in terms of the growth of the business.
Hmm.
And over time, I came to a view that, um, it was very difficult to, be special for every client. In that international circuit, I was on a plane 24/7. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that the right thing to do was to go backwards to go forwards. And I made a very, risky decision to pivot the business to building a business for Irish entrepreneurs, Irish, high net worths. I didn't see something equivalent in the Irish market. I'd been focused on the international markets, but I felt if I was going to scale the business, for the talent I had in the business and for further opportunity, that was the right thing to do. So that was probably the riskiest thing I did along the journey.
Yeah.
And having made that pivot, um, I then just opportunistically evolved the business. So, we had our family office, but focused on Irish individuals, high net worths. And then we brought product, our own product, both real estate and venture, to the table as a means of attracting them into Elkstone
Yeah.
and giving them opportunity and deal flow that they wouldn't otherwise see.
Right. And so was the principle from the very beginning to be diversified in terms of asset classes, or did you focus on one and expand over time? What was the original, let's say, thesis for what you wanted to bring to that extended Irish diaspora?
I think there were two drivers. I think there was always a belief that the smart move was to have a diversified offering and
Hmm.
not to be wedded to just one single space, be that real estate or venture or otherwise.
Yeah.
And just the concept of, having a number of engines on the plane and understanding through cycles, et cetera, et cetera. So we always had that, you know, vision that that would be the right thing to do for the business. And I think we were probably, I think time has shown that that's certainly globally where, things have
Yeah.
gone to. So the idea of the one-stop shop, and that serves well, both the manager and indeed the clients.
Hmm.
Um, I think the building up of the individual businesses, I think, was more about being opportunistic at different points in time. So we started with venture because I'd been doing, with our second client, she was very prolific in the venture space, had a terrific network. I had, built up my expertise helping her in that regard, and then began to do my own angel investing. And in building up a good track record, I took the view that, one thing that wasn't widely available in the Irish market was access to venture and
Yeah.
deal flow.
Hmm.
So that was the one I picked as a starting point to bring to prospective clients and clients to build the trust, build the relationship, and then look to upsell from the venture into other spaces.
Yeah.
Um, the financial crisis was, if you like, the seed for the real estate. So the real estate evolved very differently, but it evolved in terms of initially, I was known because of my PwC background, banking background. I had very good connections to real estate developers in the Irish market. But I also was known to have access to international money. So initially, our role in real estate was bringing those parties together. So effectively, the middleman in terms of brokering deals, being the financier, etc. But over time, we evolved that into, initially, then doing JVs and getting better economics in terms of, the value we were bringing to the table,
Yeah.
and then learning, the asset class through that, and the operator skills through that. So we evolved student accommodation as a really good example. We initially were financing student accommodation, then we were doing JVs on student accommodation, then we became a promoter developer of student accommodation.
Right.
Um, and that's the way we evolved that business. So today, Eldstone will be, we're very focused on living assets.
Hmm.
That's what our expertise is.
Yeah.
But student accommodation, multifamily, and we also do, what I would call strategic land banks in terms of housing. So we have a very big project in Blarney, and just beside Cork, second biggest city in Ireland, 2,500 houses, which in an Irish context is very, very
Significant.
meaningful.
Yeah. So was that post, let's say post 08, 09 into I guess it was about 2011 when you founded Elkstone. Was it distressed assets that you were pursuing in the real estate sector, or
Well,
just kind of opportunistic?
no,
Mm.
initially I'd say what it was, um, you know, in the context of the global financial crisis and
Mhm.
NAMA in the Irish context, there would have been. various real estate developers who needed restructuring, needed support in terms of exiting from NAMA, which was the, if you like, the bad bank in the context of the Irish scene. So
Yeah.
we were being pivotal in terms of helping a number of players exit positions and regain, if you like, their portfolio through that process.
Yeah.
So that would have been certainly, 2010, 11, 12, that would have still been very much working through the system.
Yeah.
And then as we became more expert in that space, and we then began to partner up with developers in JVs, formal JVs, to get better economics and get the balance right. And then having learned the trade, then began to do our own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've built, so today in Elkstone, we have, it's a one team culture, but we've three specialist teams. A specialist team in the wealth channel, a specialist team for real estate, and a specialist team for venture. And then, all the teams are leveraging off a single platform where we have our marketing, our compliance, and our legal and our finance and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a tremendous diversification as we look across. I mean, you've had some great successes in the venture space, notably with Flipdish and Let's Get Checked, and some great success stories that are internationally recognized and have gone on to secure significant additional funding. Um, how do you balance, let's say, the risks associated with venture capital? I mean, it's a very different mindset in terms of, let's say, the power law being applied to venture versus the model that you'd apply to real estate, and as you describe it there, that the living sectors. So you have specialist teams focused on each of those, each applying their own principles to those asset classes. Um, but if I'm an investor with you or I'm participating, I'm investing through Elkstone in these projects. How do I get exposure to these different opportunities? Do I have a
So we very much have what I would loosely describe as a mix and match model.
yeah.
So, and it does differ by, area. So first of all, on the wealth side, very
Mhm.
important that, what we're focused on is giving access to private markets. So that's, in that context, we're completely agnostic. We're giving open architecture. We're allowing our clients get access to third-party managers. We're getting access to best in class globally, and we're helping curate and put together. We're doing portfolio construction and
Right.
and and management for our clients and enabling them, build out private market portfolios. So, and we would structure that across clearly, all the categories. So, clearly private equity, credit, fixed income, real assets, infrastructure, etc. And then, uncorrelated, the likes of hedge funds and so forth. So, we have a very robust model in terms of giving our clients access to private markets. And we see ourselves as the leading player in the Irish market in terms of, being first mover in that space. And
Yeah.
then in terms of what we, would consider to be our product businesses, which is our own product, venture and real estate, again, it does differ in each space. So, venture, we've two very clear opportunities for clients. We have a venture fund, and we got legislation in Ireland changed to enable this fund be created and brought to market.
Hmm.
And the fund is dedicated to Irish venture. It's early stage, and it allows clients have a very diversified portfolio. So, getting access to 30 companies, um, and in that way, very much the power law applying. And look, venture is clearly very high risk, and each individual investment, clearly has the prospect of going to zero.
Yeah.
But, where mindset would be and our track record would be that, look, if you're investing in 30 Irish companies, it's very, very unlikely as a balanced portfolio, you're going to be losing money on that. And it's really then down to the power law in terms of how many companies will surface as being, really strong performers, et cetera, et cetera. So we think there's an opportunity for clients to get access to a diversified portfolio and have the opportunity to invest on a deal by deal basis at a later stage as the winners emerge. That's a very attractive model.
Yeah.
Equally, then, we have a club model, which is exactly that. It allows individual clients to sign them up, be part of the Elkstone family, and we bring individual deals where the client gets to choose on a case by case basis whether they want to participate or not. And that allows people flexibility in terms of check size, but also it gives them a much greater degree of control. Now, that's harder work for the clients because they have to do, their own
Yeah.
consideration and due diligence on top of our own, et cetera, et cetera. But the two work very well hand in glove. And
Yeah.
and the most important thing, clearly, in this context is about compartmentalization. People understanding where in their overall portfolio this fits in, what the purpose of the venture allocation is for, and what they should be expecting vis-a-vis, let's say, the allocation of the Elkstone Venture Fund, which is Ireland only, and access to, either the direct club model or indeed through our wealth channel, we give access to other venture funds and a proper venture allocation in a global context. On
Yeah.
the real estate side, we are focused just on living assets. Our expertise is more at what I would call the value add and development stage. So, we would be identifying sites, bringing them through planning, and putting the funding together, bringing them through construction, stabilizing the assets, and then typically selling at that stage.
Right.
But over time, we've evolved, as I explained earlier, in terms of just, what we did in terms of, financiers and then JV partners and then our own, development and promoter. But, now we would have institutional um, partners as well as, private clients. And we marry those together. So we will have, it's well publicized. One of the key supporters and partners we have is Harrison Street, based out of Chicago, big
Yeah.
real estate alternative player. And, we're working with them in student accommodation. And it's a great model that we're able to bring our private clients in, alongside Harrison Street, good peace of mind, similar economics, et cetera, et cetera. And that's working really well for us, and there's really strong alignment there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of things uh, that the observations you made there kind of prompt. Presumably the legislative change is referring to the EIS
Yes,
qualification,
yes.
right? Um, and so you lobbied the government essentially to try and have that included as part of some of
Yeah,
the.
yeah. I mean, look, the couple of different angles to that. One would be, if I put on my kind of fiduciary hat
Yeah.
for investors and clients, I had a very simple philosophy and perspective, which was that I felt for, the wealth channel, high net worth individuals and mass affluent and so forth, that, it's very high risk to be investing in individual deals.
Yeah.
And even with the best intentions and capacity, clients really struggle to build what I would consider to be a proper portfolio. And therefore, an EIS, which is a special tax relief available in Ireland, which helps offset the cost of investment, was only available if you invested in an individual company. So
Right.
my view was that, look, to build a vibrant angel ecosystem and venture ecosystem being supported by the domestic market, by the private market, um, the smart thing to do would be to enable people to invest through funds, give them the same tax breaks, because they're taking that risk, but they're doing it in a much more considered way. And by having an automatic diversification across a portfolio of 20, 30 companies, that would be a win-win-win all around. A win in terms of, I think it would attract more private money into the market
Yeah.
and into the venture ecosystem. A win because the clients are getting better protection because of that diversification, and therefore a much better prospect of actually getting the returns one should be getting through venture. And thirdly, by the success of that model, it's going to foster and nurture and build the ecosystem and make it, inflect and continue to inflect over the course of time.
Yeah.
So I just felt that was, and government policy, wanted to encourage private market investment in Irish venture.
Yeah.
So let's try and enable it. So it took a lot of lobbying, took 2.5, 3 years to get it done, but we finally got there, and we proved out that, with the right legislation and context, we could bring meaningful money to work, and we're being delighted with the portfolio construction and how things are evolving. It's
Yeah.
still early. We're only in, year 4 at this stage. Um, but we've a really nice portfolio and, very clear some emerging stars already coming through, and our club continues to perform very strongly too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it leads me to my second question, which is, broadly speaking, this democratization of access to alternative investments or private markets for the high net worth individual or even the average individual who's got some additional capital that they're happy for it to be deployed for a number of years as part of their kind of longer term planning. What are your thoughts on that as a trend? You get differing opinions because of the profile of investor. Patient capital from institutional investors versus retail investors, and the trade offs that you get with that. I mean, I think I can see your leaning here, but interested in your kind of perspective on how that's developed and continues to develop to make private capital markets available to a broader base of potential investors.
But look, I think there's so clearly Elkstone has positioned itself to be a advocate of the sense of the wealth channel
Hmm.
allocating to private markets.
Yeah.
Um, Now, we're doing that for a multitude of reasons, but certainly putting ourselves in the shoes of the investor, we think there's no doubt that there's what I might call reasons to be concerned about only having allocation to public markets, to the
Right.
traditional markets,
Yep.
and you'll be well, and your audience be well versed in, some of the watch outs there, in terms of
Hmm.
concentration, in terms of the breakdown, in terms of the traditional relationship between public market equities and bonds and so forth. So I think in a much more uncertain world today, when one thinks of equities or one thinks of fixed income, it needs to be across both private and public or public and private. And I think
Yep.
that's the smart way forward in terms of proper diversification. And so I think for diversification reasons, it's very important to have access to private markets. I
Hmm.
think then, look, time will always tell, and there's no certainty. But, clearly, traditionally, private markets have had that premium in terms of, higher returns.
Hmm.
And they need to deliver the higher returns given, some of the disadvantages. But I think the other thing that's clearly evolving and needs to evolve further, and it's different in different geographies, and we're probably a little bit more challenged here in Ireland than perhaps one might be, for example, in the US. But the innovation around the products is clearly evolving, and
Yeah.
therefore, I think we're going to see, I think, continuously, and I think on a more accelerated basis, just much better product to enable retail investors, the wealth channel, invest in private markets. And yes, there'll be still some disadvantages in terms of, lockup periods and, questions around the robustness of liquidity, but it's definitely helping. And I think ultimately it goes back to the word I used earlier on compartmentalization. People properly understanding and being guided with their financial advisors around, portfolio construction, about liquidity, about, how to manage that. And there's a space and a place for both public markets and private markets in people's portfolios. But I
Yeah.
think it's a win-win being able to have an access and have both.
Yeah. And given your focus on the I guess the living environment as you describe it, it's well publicized. In fact, the U.S. is really very similar insofar as the housing starts are down. There's high absorption rates of rental properties. The outlook is very strong. But looking at the Irish market. Let's say student accommodation, it's well publicized that there isn't enough accommodation available. So you're clearly meeting an already established need there. How do you feel the government is supporting? You've had to lobby them, as you say, for 2.5 years to have that inclusion of on the EIS initiative. How do you feel the Irish government is responding to that need locally, given the lack of available, not just student accommodation, but generally speaking, rental accommodation in this market?
Look, I think, similar to other jurisdictions, but I think it's even it's very acute in Ireland. Housing is probably the number one political issue in an Irish
Yeah.
context, and it has been for quite some time. Now, you know, by definition then, or just using kind of logic, that in itself spells out that the government have struggled to bring the solutions to the table that are needed.
Hmm.
So I think it has got and it continues to get a lot of attention, but it's a very, very complex problem to solve.
Yeah.
Ireland undoubtedly has, a real structural imbalance between supply and demand, and much more supply is needed. Affordability is definitely part of the equation, but the issues range from the availability of funding, international funding, in terms of what's going to be needed to help solve the supply side, but also lots of other issues in terms of, the planning context. There's also issues around rent controls. They're being addressed, but they need to be, further clarification is needed.
Yeah.
It looks very promising on the what I might call the residential housing side, but on the student accommodation side, it's opaque, and that's causing the market right now to stall because people are looking for certainty that they will be able to have appropriate price increases going forward.
Yeah.
So there's a multitude of things to be fixed. I think they're being tackled, but the way I'd put it is, um, I think there's going to be challenges for quite some time, and I think it will take quite some time to get a better balance between supply and demand. But in the meantime, I think for international capital looking at Ireland, and given the wider backdrop of the robust Irish economy and our positioning and demographics and everything else, housing, living assets, tremendous opportunity. So there's definitely opportunity for those who have the mindset and the capability of finding the right local partners like Elkstone in the Irish market,
Yeah.
and delivering the right type of product here. So I'm bullish that the challenges give a lot of opportunity, and some of the uncertainties and frustrations are going to be dealt with in the very near term. We've legislation coming early next year that I think certainly on the rent cap side will be immensely helpful. And the
Yeah.
flow of funding is improving, but I think that in itself is where the opportunity is.
Yeah. And on that, you mentioned Harrison Street there on the partnership side. So you partner with third party companies like that in putting these deals together. Is that a core model for you moving forward on let's say on the real estate strategy? Is that
Yeah, we think that makes a lot of sense for
you?
everybody. I think it makes a lot of sense. The Irish market's going to need, we're not going to have within our, what I might call our domestic market,
Yeah.
sufficient capital to solve the housing crisis. That's well documented, well known. We're going to need, a tremendous amount of external capital coming into the Irish market, from private markets and so forth. And it's not just about money, it's then about the ability to execute and apply and do that in the right way. So
Yeah.
there's going to be a need for more partnerships, between local expertise and players like Elkstone and international players like Harrison Street. And,
Yeah.
we're certainly very keen to, do more of that. And Elkstone itself is now on the panel with the Land Development Agency. We're delighted with that. That gives us an opportunity to help again on the housing side in terms of, multifamily and housing, in terms of help alleviate the issues there. And that brings further opportunity. So yes, I see Elkstone definitely as a model looking to build out and on a continuous basis. So we're not interested in what I might call transactional relationships. We want to build long-lasting, meaningful relationships with the right international players to, bring living assets to an Ireland that's growing well and needs a lot more product and the right type of product in the right locations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that'll be an interesting one to watch. But as you say, kind of a ready-made partner in country in Elkstone, which is that's that's uh, that's a great model. Um, just switching gears very briefly, then, Alan, on the venture side, it sounds like you're focused on early stage investing. Would that be true to
Yeah,
say?
fund one, which was
Yeah,
100 million fund, that's maybe, clearly modest in a global context, but in Ireland, that's the largest early stage fund when we launched it.
yeah,
And, we did seed and pre-A. Um, So we were targeting up to 30 companies. We'll be fully deployed by the end of this year, very latest, I think early Q1 next year.
Hmm.
Very happy with the progression. But we're now looking at Fund 2. So
Yep.
we literally got authorized last week, Fund 2 with the Irish Central Bank. We're beginning the marketing now for first close. It's going to differ in a few ways to Fund 1. So Fund 2, we're going to do initial checks at Series A as well as pre-A and seed.
Right.
Series A is probably where the most acute funding gap is in the Irish venture ecosystem. So we're very bullish about our opportunity to get to the very best Irish companies and be part of that solution and get that access.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing we're doing is we're making this fund an all Ireland fund. So Fund 1 was Republic of Ireland.
Yeah.
Fund 2 is going to be the entire island. And we think that's brilliant for lots of different reasons, but essentially it gives us the prospect of making sure we are going to have a portfolio of the very best companies across Ireland.
Yeah.
And secondly, we have a great determination that we're going to have a very strong cohort of investors in this fund that are going to be the Irish diaspora.
Hmm.
Um, that's been a very considered strategy for two reasons. One, Ireland needs, despite the success of the country as a whole with foreign direct investment and so forth, and the demographics and everything else, our ecosystem, our venture ecosystem needs more capital.
Yeah.
And we're going to need to get it. We don't have the tradition in Ireland of, big foundations. We don't have a big pension industry, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to attract international capital. And I believe that one of the best routes for doing that would be through the Irish diaspora. So we need a big Irish diaspora in this fund for capital reasons, as part of that solution. But more importantly, we really believe that the Irish diaspora can be a strategic partner in terms of the network compounding and the help that an Irish diaspora could do to help Irish companies scale internationally. So certainly for your audience, those who have Irish connections and Irish leanings and so forth, the ability to invest in an Elkstone venture fund too, that is investing in Ireland Inc., investing in early stage companies in Ireland that they personally can be connected to, be involved with, and help them with their access to other international markets is I hope a very attractive opportunity. And our track record is very clear. The one thing we can be very bullish on is we're going to be able to give you access to, up to 40 companies in Fund 2 that will be amongst the very best venture opportunities across the island of Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent, and, yeah, I saw that news, which so congratulations on that fund. Just talking about the fundraising environment, I mean, we deal with, private capital, general partners globally, here at Asset Class, and we're certainly hearing more, cautious optimism, shoots of recovery. What does the fundraising environment look like for you at Elkstone, as you embark now on this all island fund?
To be seen, I think is the very candid
Yep.
answer to that. I think we've got the last time round, and again you have to size this in the context of Ireland and our markets. 100 million was our hard cap. We genuinely didn't think we were going to be anywhere close to that. Um, it was the track record that we had at the time in terms of our club that brought in those monies and our reputation, and we were delighted. Um, this time round, we have a track record as a fund manager, and that will be very helpful. It's a different environment in terms of the macro context. So, we've been
Yep.
through globally the venture winter. We're probably still not quite out of it. People are probably a little bit more cautious, so we have that backdrop. But I think, through re-ups, through the anchor investors, the Irish Sovereign Wealth Fund and Enterprise Ireland were in our first fund. They'll definitely be there for us in Fund 2. And this Irish diaspora component, which is new, and the fact that we're targeting the island of Ireland and from an impact investing, I'm hopeful that we will have a good run here, but we'll see. We'll see what the market will give us. And we're here for the long run. We're here. It's a marathon,
Yep.
and our agenda, our North Star in Elkstone is enabling deserving investments across the island of Ireland. And we think about that in the context of, venture. We think about it in the context of housing. These are deserving investments. It's needed by the country, and founders that deserve backing because of their innovation, their talent, the opportunity they have, and Elkstone want to be part of that solution, and to do it in a way that's giving our investors very meaningful financial return. That's a really nice win-win.
Yeah. And just in terms of your, let's say, investment thesis, Alan, particularly on the venture side, because I've certainly heard you quoted in the past for your early stage investments in companies like Let's Get Checked, like Flipdish, like Soapbox, that you were kind of first money in, or almost
Yep,
contrarian to what they were seeing, like it was difficult for them to raise, but you were
yep.
writing these checks. Would you say that, and now you're focusing on, or extending your focus now to start writing checks for Series A in a market where it's difficult to get that?
Yep.
Um, w how would you describe your investment Is it contrarian, or is it something different?
Well, look, what I would say is that we were probably the new player to the Irish venture ecosystem,
Mhm.
and um, I think in that context, we just had a different risk appetite, and because we'd been investing internationally primarily before we started investing in Ireland, maybe that helped. But we were very clear we wanted to bring real venture like returns to the Irish market, and we understand the power law, and we understand the type of company you need to be backing to achieve that.
Yeah,
And that means, of course, that in any portfolio you'll have a multitude of companies that won't make it. So we were never afraid of that. We were always clear on educating our clients, the members of our club, the people coming into the fund, that that was what we were doing. We were setting out to build, to choose, to select, win access to venture-like companies,
yeah.
venture returners. Um, and you look, in all walks of life, you need some good fortune, and we've been fortunate that it appear, our picking has been good.
Just a quick interlude. I'm Ferdy Roberts, CEO and founder at Asset Class. And at Asset Class, we provide software solutions for the front, middle, and back office of firms like yours in the private equity, venture capital, commercial real estate, and broader private capital markets. So check us out at assetclass.com. We'd love to talk. Now, on with the episode.
There just isn't the breadth and depth to build a portfolio of 30 to 40 companies in just one sector. So we're agnostic, we're generalists. Our job is to get you access to the very best opportunities in Ireland in venture.
Yeah,
And one thing I'm really, really proud of is that our reputation amongst the founder community is top notch. We win well over 90% of the deals that we actually want to invest in. And that's because the founder community and the portfolio of companies that we've invested in over the course of time are our best ambassadors. And we encourage any founder that we're dealing with to go and do their own due diligence. And we're
yeah,
confident that when they do their due diligence and we don't direct them, that they're going to get very strong feedback on how Elkstone acts as a VC, the type of value we bring, how we use our venture advisory panel in a real substantive way, and how we're there in the good times and the bad times. And our hope, our aspiration is that, that will serve us well and our clients well, our LPs well over time.
yeah. Yeah, well, I can certainly attest to that. I know a couple of the founders in companies you've invested in, and hear nothing but great things. And we've had the opportunity of working with your team. Two final questions, Alan. One is kind of internally focused, and then one externally
Yep.
focused. So internally, I mean, you've built a tremendous team at Elkstone. Very difficult to do, right? To get that breadth of talent across the kind of spectrum of areas of focus, venture capital, wealth, uh, uh, eh, and real estate, etc. How challenging has that been in the Irish market, as you built this team, a substantial team in Dublin? Beautiful offices, by the way. Haven't been there,
Thank
but
you.
you've got a great team there. How difficult or how challenging has that been, uh, given that you are focused on and growing the company substantially in Ireland?
Um, Look, I think in truth, it hasn't been that difficult.
Mm.
I think the big advantage we have is that we're a rarity in an Irish context. There's not
Hmm.
many firms. There's no firm really like Elkstone at all.
Yeah.
Um, our own people are our best ambassadors, in terms of drawing in other talent. Um, and look, I'll just use venture as it's probably the best example, but you know, if I think the last graduate opportunity of new venture associate we were bringing in, we got hundreds of applications,
Yeah.
locally and internationally.
Hmm.
Um, so people come to Elkstone because they're intrigued by the perceived success we're having from outside,
Yeah.
and because of what they hear about our culture as a one team, three specialist teams, but a one team mindset. Um, and because they believe in what we're trying to do as a vision. Our vision is to be that North Star of enabling deserving investments across the island of Ireland. We're making a real difference, whether it comes to living assets and housing. We've been involved in 5, 6 student accommodation plays in this country that, they're there. We can touch them, we can feel them, we can see them. They're making a
Yeah.
real difference. The same with housing, the same with multifamily. And on the venture side, it's probably, I've lost count, but we're certainly, in terms of my own angel investing and then the club and then the fund, 70 plus companies.
Yeah.
Um, that's real, that's tangible. And
Yeah.
people like, in this day and age, people like being involved in real things, touching and
Yeah.
feeling things and knowing they're making a difference, as well as, um, earning a living. So, yeah, I think I wouldn't be complacent, but it hasn't been, the talent is here in Ireland, and the talent, we've Irish people all across the world who are very keen to come back to Ireland and work in Ireland, and particularly in some of the, geopolitical issues we're having at the moment. Ireland's becoming more attractive rather than less attractive from that perspective. People coming back to Ireland, wanting to have Ireland as their home. So our ability to attract and retain talent, I think, is not something I worry about.
Yeah.
Getting access to funding, getting the capital to make these needed investments in the Irish venture ecosystem or Irish housing, they're the things I worry about, because we're
Yeah.
in competition locally and internationally, and we're still young in our journey and we've a lot to do. So we've got our challenges despite the perceptions of our success outside, and we're at the very early stages. Our biggest risk in Elkstone is that we're too early in the
Right.
context of the Irish market. The biggest upside for us is that if we have this right and we navigate our way through, we're going to be wonderfully placed as a
Yeah.
long lasting and very powerful brand and player in the Irish market, for both the high net worth and mass affluent market in Ireland to support, but also the Irish diaspora to have that connection back home in a real, tangible, meaningful way, and get good financial returns alongside that.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to my final question, nicely, Alan, which is more externally focused. You're launching your All Ireland Fund. You're in some really interesting markets in terms of the living sector. There's huge demand for that. It's underserved. You've got some great partnerships in place. You're moving into this fundraising piece, and I guess even in the venture side, valuations being a lot more realistic than they have been in the
Yep.
past. Great time, I mean, it has all the hallmarks of a great vintage
Yes.
fund for
Yes.
people to be, you want to make those investments when those valuations are realistic and certainly lower than you hope they will be 5, 7 years from now when you exit. What is your plan if you kind of project out over the next 5 to 7 years? Let's say the time horizon of this. Where would you like to be as a company in terms of your focus? What does that look like to the extent that's not a prediction really, but where would you like to be relative to those initiatives? 5 to 7 years from now.
Yeah, look, it's a big question. Certainly, where I'd like to be is that, I probably have to talk about the different businesses on the
You.
venture side to be, undoubted as the Irish domestic venture champion,
Yeah.
and to be a real beacon for the very best international VCs, to draw them into Ireland and be their partner in terms of investing in the very best Irish companies. And for us to be, and I have no apology for this, I think a great ambition for Elkstone is to be the feeder for the very best international VCs in terms of
Yep.
the very best Irish companies.
Yeah.
And that's where, I plan to be in 5, 6 years on the venture side, and to have grown out the Irish um, appetite and participation in venture in the Irish market. On the real estate side, our core focus is living assets. So, really what we want to do is have built out the model where we've got a multitude of international partners, um, and where we're delivering, substantial number of units, 2,000, 3,000 units on a continuous basis. That would be, the ambition in terms of what
Yeah.
we believe we have the capability of doing with the right partners. And again, that would make a meaningful contribution in the context of Ireland. And then on the wealth side, we do genuinely believe that, look, we're literally only starting in terms of the Irish investor base
Hmm.
accessing private markets. So for Elkstone to be the brand and the trusted partner for the high net worth and mass affluent market, the wealth channel, to be
Yeah.
accessing and running their portfolios for them in private markets, and to bring the very best private market asset managers to Ireland, help them with their distribution, etc., etc. Um, and what would be an amazing, vision and success would be that, as I said earlier, we're serving two markets: the geography of Ireland, but
Yeah.
also the Irish diaspora. So to have built the bridge to enable the Irish diaspora take a real contemporary interest in Ireland, in the Ireland of tomorrow, help build the future Ireland, and
Hmm.
bringing and drawing their money into Ireland, and making that very authentic and very real and very rewarding. So to be the Irish private markets champion,
Yeah.
whether you're living in Ireland or whether you're got a strong affinity with Ireland, and making a
Yeah.
real difference and backing deserving founders and investors.
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful ambition, matched only, I'm sure, by the ambition of your portfolio of investments. Alan, I wish you the very best of luck with that. For people who want to learn more about Elkstone Partners, connect with you or your team, what's the best way to do that?
I think the most straightforward way is definitely the portal, the website. So
Yep.
elkstonepartners.com, and
Yep.
that will give everybody a very good understanding of what we do and the type of opportunities we have. And by all means, reach out to me directly. Would love to hear from anybody and engage. And so Alan at elkstonepartners.com is the easiest way to get to me. Alan at elkstonepartners.com.
Yeah.
And really
Perfect.
appreciate the opportunity, Ferdy. You've been a great supporter for Elkstone, and look, we love what you and your team are doing with us as well. And as a fellow Irishman, delighted with your own success, and look forward to seeing you do, more and more going forward.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much, Alan. Well, for today on the People of Private Capital, Alan Merriman of Elkstone Partners, thanks very much.
Take care. Bye.